Think about your last 3 relationships. Not the names, not the faces, the feeling, the specific texture of what it felt like to be with them. The way they pulled back when you got close. Or the way you could never quite reach them even when they were right there. Or the particular flavor of longing you carried the whole time. That sense of almost but not quite. Was that feeling familiar? Not just from your last relationship, from the one before that too, and the one before that. Here is what the research actually shows. The people we fall for are not random. They are not bad luck. They are not a coincidence. They are selected. Not by your conscious mind. Not by your preferences or your standards or your list. By a template that was locked into the right hemisphere of your brain before you were 2 years old, before you could speak, before you had any memory of choosing anything at all. The standard narrative dismantled. There is a standard explanation for why people repeat relationship patterns. You have heard it. Everyone has. You are attracted to what is familiar. You had a difficult parent, so you seek out partners who replicate that dynamic. You have low self-worth, so you accept less than you deserve. You are addicted to the chase, the anxiety, the drama. There is some truth in all of that. Here is what that explanation gets wrong. It treats the pattern as a conscious choice you are making badly. As if the solution is to think harder, choose better, want different things. As if your preferences are the problem and insight is the cure. If that were true, the pattern would stop the moment you understood it. But it does not stop, does it? You can name exactly what you are doing. You can see it happening in real time. You can tell your friends what is going on with full psychological clarity. And then you do it again. Because the pattern is not running in the part of your brain that responds to insight. It is running somewhere much older, much deeper, and much more difficult to reach with words alone. In 1969, a British psychiatrist named John Bowlby published the first volume of what would become his most important work. It was called Attachment and Loss. Bowlby had spent years observing what happened to children who were separated from their caregivers. Not in theory, in orphanages, in hospitals, in documented case studies that other psychiatrists had been too uncomfortable to follow through to their conclusions. What he found was this. The infant mind, in the first months of life, is doing something that looks passive, but is actually intensely active. It is building a model. Bowlby called it the internal working model, a neurological template encoded in the right hemisphere of the brain that answers 3 fundamental questions based entirely on early caregiver experience. Are other people reliable? Am I worth being close to? What does love feel like when it is real? The infant's brain does not ask these questions in words. It does not have words yet. It registers patterns, repetitions, the response time when it cries, whether closeness is followed by warmth or by withdrawal, whether the person it needs most is predictable or unpredictable. And then it encodes those patterns as a template for what relationships are. Not what they should be, what they are. That template goes with you into every relationship you will ever have. Allan Schore at the UCLA David Geffen School of Medicine spent decades mapping where that template lives in the brain. His research identified the right orbitofrontal cortex as the primary site of early attachment encoding. This is a region that develops rapidly in the first 18 months of life and operates largely outside conscious awareness. It is not accessible through language. It is not updated by arguments. It does not care what you tell yourself about what you want. It runs a pattern recognition program, and that program has one job: find what matches the template. And here is the part that stops people cold when they actually let it land. The template was not set by your first relationship. It was not set by the person who hurt you most. It was not set by any romantic partner you have ever had. It was set before you were 2 years old, before you had language, before you had conscious memory, before you could have chosen anything, wanted anything, or understood anything about love. The pattern you keep repeating in your adult relationships was encoded in your brain before you have a single memory of it being written. Mary Ainsworth at the University of Virginia ran what became one of the most replicated experiments in developmental psychology. The strange situation. An infant is placed in a room with their caregiver, then separated, then reunited. The patterns of infant response, whether they ran back to the caregiver or froze or ignored them entirely on return, mapped onto consistent attachment strategies that Ainsworth categorized as secure, anxious, and avoidant. Those same three patterns appear decades later in adult romantic relationships with a predictability that is, frankly, uncomfortable. The infant who froze at the caregiver's return becomes the adult who cannot decide whether to stay or leave. The infant who ignored the returning caregiver becomes the adult who pulls away the moment closeness becomes real. The infant who ran back and clung becomes the adult who cannot stop checking, chasing, and trying to close the gap. The template runs, the loop repeats, and here is the sensation you will recognize if you think back to the moment you met the last person who pulled you in hard. There was something that felt like recognition. Not just attraction, something older, a feeling of, I know this. I have been here before. That was not intuition about compatibility. That was your right orbitofrontal cortex firing a familiarity signal. Your brain found a match for the template, and it told you it felt like home, even if home was never particularly safe. Now here is what Jung adds to this investigation that Bowlby and Schore alone cannot provide. Bowlby gave us the mechanism, the IWM, the template. Schore gave us the location, the right orbitofrontal cortex, the pre-verbal encoding. Jung gave us the explanation for why the pattern does not just repeat quietly in the background, why it becomes compulsive, why it intensifies, why the people who match your template most closely are often the ones who pull at you most powerfully. In Volume 8 of his collected works, Jung described what he called the autonomous complex. An autonomous complex is a cluster of emotionally charged associations that operates in the unconscious with its own agenda, independent of conscious will. It is not a thought you are having. It is a force that has thoughts through you, desires through you, chooses through you. In the context of relationship patterns, the attachment complex functions exactly like a casting director. It scans the environment. It evaluates every person you meet, not for who they consciously appear to be, but for how closely they match the template it is trying to resolve. And when it finds a match, it generates what Jung called fascination, an energetic pull that your conscious mind experiences as attraction, chemistry, destiny. What you are feeling as fate is your complex doing its job. But there is a second layer here that is even more important. In Volume 9, Part 1 of the collected works, Jung described what he called the eternal return as an archetypal pattern. He was not using this term the way Nietzsche used it, as a philosophical thought experiment about time. He was describing something he observed clinically. The psyche, when it holds an unresolved experience, does not move past it. It circles back. It recreates the conditions of the original wound in the present, not out of masochism, but out of a drive toward completion, toward resolution, toward finally being able to do something different at the exact moment that originally broke something open. The repetition is not failure. It is the psyche's attempt at healing, running a strategy that cannot work until it becomes conscious. Think about the specific dynamic you keep recreating. What would it have meant in your earliest experience of attachment if that dynamic had resolved differently? What would have been possible if the person who first taught you what love felt like had shown up in a way that was safe, consistent, close? That is what the pattern is reaching for. It is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to finish something that never got finished. There is a novel published in 1847 that is almost universally taught as a love story. It is not a love story. It is the most precise literary documentation of the attachment loop ever written. By a woman who had never heard of Bowlby or Jung, working 60 years before Freud named repetition compulsion, and 122 years before Ainsworth ran The Strange Situation. Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights. Heathcliff arrives at Wuthering Heights as an orphan with no known origin. He is taken in by Mr. Earnshaw, treated as a son, and then systematically displaced, degraded, and cast out after Earnshaw dies. Catherine Earnshaw grows up in the same house. Her attachment situation is different, but equally fractured. Her father brings in a replacement child who disrupts her position. Her mother is absent from the narrative entirely. The emotional environment of her childhood is unstable, unpredictable, and fundamentally unsafe. Two children with profoundly damaged internal working models, raised in the same household. They attach to each other not despite their wounds, but because of them. Each recognizes in the other the specific texture of a particular kind of love. Intense, unreliable, consuming, never quite safe enough to fully rest in. It feels like home, because it matches the template. What Bronte then documents, through the rest of the novel and into the next generation, is the exact mechanism Jung described in his concept of the eternal return. Neither Heathcliff nor Catherine resolves their original wound. Catherine marries Edgar Linton, who is safe and consistent and kind, and she is utterly incapable of being present in that relationship because her attachment complex is still locked onto Heathcliff. Heathcliff returns, destroys everything around him, and still cannot reach her. The pattern does not complete, it intensifies, and then Bronte does something extraordinary. She shows the second generation repeating the loop. Heathcliff's son, Linton, and Catherine's daughter, Cathy, are maneuvered into a relationship by Heathcliff. The dynamics of the original wound are recreated in the next generation with different faces, the same person, different bodies. Bronte understood something in 1847 that attachment science spent the next century trying to formally prove. The loop does not just repeat within a single life, it transmits. The unresolved template passes from parent to child, not through genetics, but through the quality of early attachment. The wound that was never made conscious becomes the environment the next generation is shaped by. Jung called this the inherited complex. Attachment researchers call it intergenerational transmission of attachment patterns. Bronte just called it the story. So, the template was encoded before you were 2. It runs outside conscious awareness. It has been selecting partners for you for decades. Can it be changed? The research says yes, but not by thinking differently. Bowlby's work and the decades of attachment research built on it identified what is called earned secure attachment. The finding: people who had insecure early attachment can develop patterns that function like secure attachment. Not through insight alone, through new relational experiences that are consistent enough over sufficient time to begin updating the IWM. The right orbitofrontal cortex is not frozen. It is slow to update because it was built for survival, and survival systems resist change. But it does update. What updates? It is not understanding the pattern. It is experiencing something genuinely different and surviving it. Experiencing safety in a relationship and not running from it. Experiencing someone showing up consistently and letting that consistency register in the body, not just the mind. Here is something concrete you can do right now. The next time you feel that pull of recognition towards someone, that feeling of "I know this, I have been here before," treat it as information rather than confirmation. Not as a sign to run, not as a sign to proceed, as a question. What specifically does this familiarity feel like? Where do you feel it in your body? Is it excitement? Or is it anxiety wearing the costume of excitement? The familiarity signal and the safety signal feel different when you slow down enough to distinguish them. That distinction is the beginning of the loop breaking. Go back to that feeling you thought about at the start, the specific texture of the relationships that kept finding you. That texture was not random. It was not a character flaw. It was a template encoded before you had words, doing the only thing it knew how to do: reaching for completion. The investigation continues next time. We go to 3 a.m., to the specific hour when the rational mind goes offline and the unconscious runs the whole operation without interference. Why it is always 3 a.m. What your brain is actually doing, and why Jung knew exactly what that hour meant long before the neuroscience of sleep had the data to explain it.